For 70,000 years, the Yellowstone volcano has remained quiet. Its incredible hot springs, bubbling pools of mud, unearthly ponds, and the most celebrated natural feature, the Old Faithful geyser, are some of nature's greatest wonders. But beneath this primal beauty simmers a hidden threat. 5 miles below the waterfalls and mountain peaks lies the heart of a supervolcano, a constantly moving cauldron of molten rock the size of Mount Everest. Over countless millions of years, it fills with lava to the breaking point. Like a bomb with a hidden timer, it finally explodes. Yellowstone's last super eruption occurred 640,000 years ago. It started as a single massive volcano, but soon turned into a series of eruptions, exploding with the full force of a supervolcano. If sometime in the future it were to erupt, as it has before, the Yellowstone volcano would overwhelm everything within 100 miles and disrupt lives across the globe for years. The first sign of trouble will be increasing seismic activity. The ground would rise as pressure from the molten rock begins to grow. Finally, the lava would shatter the Earth's surface with an explosion 10 times larger than Mount St. Helens. A hurricane of hot gases would spread out in all directions as the ash cloud reaches 80,000 feet into the air. Already larger than anything man has experienced, this would be just the beginning of a Yellowstone super eruption. Within days, a second enormous eruption would begin, then another. Soon, a ring of monstrous explosions 50 miles wide would be spewing molten rock and burning gases across the landscape. High in the atmosphere, the ash cloud would surround the planet, sending temperatures plunging. Global agriculture would fall into chaos. How do we know it will happen? Because it's happened before. The evidence is etched into the geologic record of past supervolcanoes. There are 1,500 volcanoes around the world. But there are fewer than 10 supervolcanoes. The ones with the potential to not only destroy the surrounding area, but to create a global disaster. And Yellowstone is one of these supervolcanoes. Its devastation would reach around the world. This Yellowstone eruption 640,000 years ago changed the face of North America. But that wasn't the only super eruption to ever strike the area. Besides the 3 calderas found near Yellowstone Park, geologists have discovered a series of eruptions and super eruptions that extend back 16 million years. With a history of multiple cataclysmic eruptions, Yellowstone is becoming the most studied supervolcano in the world. And its hundreds of yearly earthquakes, thousands of geysers, and massive magma chamber make it one of the most geologically active regions. As the research continues, scientists are realizing how little they really know about the Yellowstone volcano. One thing is known for sure. If Yellowstone erupts again, pyroclastic flows will destroy everything near the volcano, and its ash cloud would overwhelm humanity across the globe. And predicting its eruption could be a matter of life and death. Yellowstone. Its dreamlike natural beauty may sometime in the future turn into a nightmare. With little warning, the gigantic volcano could awaken and explode, putting the entire planet at risk. Unlike most disasters, such as tornadoes or hurricanes, which are short-lived and localized, a volcanic super eruption in Yellowstone would have global effects for years. Its impact would be on the scale of an asteroid, large enough to change the way we view our history. Most scientists believe an asteroid caused the disappearance of the dinosaurs 65 million years ago. But new discoveries suggest volcanoes can cause planet-wide devastation as well. One of the early volcanoes fueled by the Yellowstone hotspot left a gruesome graveyard 1,000 miles downwind. Their bones, discovered in northern Nebraska, tell a distressing story of Yellowstone's impact. They were found buried under several feet of ash, volcanic debris linked to a super eruption. Most of the fossil bones exhibited evidence of a strange illness, a clue to why so many animals died.
It has the extra growth of bone on the leg bones and on the jaws.
The unusual bone growth is a signature symptom of Marie's disease, a rare lung condition resulting from breathing large amounts of dust or ash. During a super eruption, the tremendous pressures cause the molten rock to explode. It turns the rock into tiny pieces of glass, which drift with the wind and land hundreds of miles away. Most of the animals on the Nebraska plains suffocated on the ash within a week of the eruption. This from a supervolcano 1,000 miles away. More recently, the 1815 eruption of the Indonesian island of Tambora proved ash could kill indirectly through dramatic climate change. 50 times larger than Mount St. Helens, the impact of the Tambora volcano was overwhelming. The eruption reduced the mountain by 4,000 feet, as nearly 150 million tons of ash and debris were ejected into the air. The ash cloud could be seen for hundreds of miles. It took almost a year for the ash to spread across the rest of the globe. But when it did, the results were staggering. A New England newspaper from 1816 published this account.
Snow and hail began to fall about 10 o'clock a.m., and the storm continued till evening, accompanied by a brisk wind.
This was June 15th. The unusually frigid weather reached Europe, some 9,000 miles from Tambora, throwing life there into chaos. And the Tambora eruption doesn't begin to match the fury of a Yellowstone super eruption. Even smaller than Tambora was the 1991 eruption of Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines, which devoured villages out to 200 miles. Yet despite its modest size, Pinatubo altered the global climate for years and has been linked to the destructive hurricanes Andrew and Iniki. It may sound trivial, but a 2-degree change in global temperature over a long time could create unusually severe storms and kill off all but the hardiest plant life. Pinatubo was 100 times smaller than the last Yellowstone super eruption and had cataclysmic effects across the globe. Imagine what Yellowstone would do. In recent geological history, only the colossal eruption of Toba on the island of Sumatra can match the size of Yellowstone. And that eruption some 70,000 years ago may have nearly destroyed the human race. It likely erupted for 2 weeks, dropping ash 6 inches deep on the subcontinent of India. But Toba's greatest impact was felt halfway across the planet in Africa. Around the time of the Toba eruption, it's thought the population of early man was catastrophically reduced. It appears a bottleneck or a contraction of the human population occurred, reducing our numbers from possibly hundreds of thousands to just a few thousand. It may be that the 6.5 billion people who inhabit the Earth today are the direct descendants of the few who survived the Toba eruption. If a single eruption like Toba is powerful enough to almost destroy the human race, what would a similar supervolcano do today? At Yellowstone, we may be on the edge of a precipice, and the question is not if it will erupt, but how and when. The fear is faults that make up the earthquake zone could crack under pressure from the magma below, releasing an eruption. Geologists are also watching the park's geysers, hot springs, and mud pots, looking for drastic changes in temperatures and chemical content. Anything that might indicate a major movement of magma. But if the water temperatures were to rise, the ground begin to swell, or there were an increase in earthquake activity, another Yellowstone eruption could be building. However, predicting the precise timing of an eruption is far from simple. Scientists have been fooled in the past. Therein lies the problem. All we can do is monitor the volcano, but it may not be enough to predict a possible eruption. Mount St. Helens was the most scrutinized volcano in history, and it exploded before the area could be cleared, killing 56 people. At Yellowstone, despite its remote location, a giant eruption could put thousands of lives at risk. We may not be able to prevent an eruption, but when the molten rock begins to move up toward the surface, will all the scientific data warn us in time? Now, using historical records, scientific models, and the latest in computer technology, you will witness the devastation that follows when the giant volcano of Yellowstone erupts. The first indications of a Yellowstone eruption will be rumblings heard underfoot as dozens of small earthquakes begin. The ground begins to rise from the pressure of the expanding hot waters, gases, and surging magma. The temblors grow in strength, spreading across the entire rim of the caldera. All the tourists have to be cleared from the park. Officials send out warnings to towns within a 100-mile radius, the danger zone of a Yellowstone super eruption. The cities of Bozeman, Montana, and Cody, Wyoming prepare for the worst. Throughout the park, new cracks in the ground release huge geysers, spouting superheated water hundreds of feet into the air. The last of the tourists and park personnel must rush to leave the park, trying to reach a safe distance some 100 miles away before the caldera lets go. They may not have enough time. Lava first appears, oozing out of cracks in the surface. Then, steam and ash explode hundreds of feet into the air. But instead of this relieving the pressure, it pushes the volcano over the edge. From 5 miles below the surface, molten rock heated to 1,200 degrees bursts into the air. Like a hurricane of ash, pyroclastic flows rip along the ground at 100 miles per hour. For those who left the park within the past half hour, their luck has run out. 50 miles away, the 30,000 residents of Bozeman, Montana watch in horror as the plume of ash and rock reaches into the sky. If they know anything about Yellowstone's past, they'll know they have little time before their city is devastated. The sky begins to darken as the ash cloud obscures the afternoon sun. Then, a second eruption begins on the other side of the caldera. Then another. It is no longer a simple volcanic eruption. Like it did hundreds of thousands of years ago, Yellowstone builds into the largest eruption known to man. The giant cauldron of magma spews 1 million tons of melted rock thousands of feet into the air as several volcanoes continue to erupt. Wave after wave of burning ash and debris destroy everything in their paths. With so little warning, nearly 400,000 people are at risk. And it gets worse. A brilliant summer afternoon begins to look like a blustery, snowy night. The weight of the falling ash collapses roofs across the states of Wyoming, Idaho, and Utah, killing thousands, while a cloud of lighter ash, 1,000 times larger than the one produced by Mount St. Helens, drifts eastward with the wind. Air travel grinds to a halt as the ash cloud reaches the upper atmosphere. And then, the deadliest part of the Yellowstone eruption begins. Across the country, masks are supplied to protect people against the ash. But farm animals have no protection. Within weeks, vast numbers of the country's livestock die, like the animals that roam the Nebraska plains 12 million years before. And volcanic ash covers much of the Midwest's farmland. And the effects could last for years. Millions of people could die from starvation related directly to the ashfall in America's Midwest. Countless more would suffer as the ash cloud drifts across the globe, dramatically changing our climate. The Toba eruption suggests that ash particles would remain in the atmosphere for 6 years, radically cooling the planet. It could mean snow in June, frost in August, and the killing off of crops for years to come. But one day, history will repeat itself. The slumber of the Yellowstone caldera will end, and the planet will face potential catastrophe. Hopefully by then we'll be prepared. But if not, it could be one of nature's greatest mega disasters.
Scientists are releasing a new warning about the threat of a massive supervolcano eruption, like the one under Yellowstone National Park in Wyoming. Now, Yellowstone's volcano doesn't look like some others because it's a caldera, or a crater. It's around ground level instead of towering into the clouds. But scientists say it covers a really enormous reserve of magma beneath the Earth's surface. We have a rendering of what scientists say this underneath that volcano, an ocean of molten rock, they tell us, that stretches for hundreds of miles. Michio Kaku joins us now. He's a theoretical physicist, a professor, a best-selling author, and friend of the program. Give us some context on this, what we're talking about here.
Well, forget the image of Yogi Bear representing Yellowstone. We're talking about a sleeping Godzilla underneath Yellowstone that, if it erupts in a maximum eruption called Category 8, it could literally tear the guts out of the United States of America. Instead of having 50 states of the Union, we would only have 30 states of the Union. Now that's Category 8. This report looked at Category 7, which is much more likely once every 1,000 years rather than once every million years. That means in every century, there's a 10% chance that somewhere on the planet Earth there could be a supervolcanic Category 7 eruption. That's the danger.
You just talked about a volcano that could wipe out 20 states. How in the world is that possible?
Well, it's happened before. 2.1 million years ago, 1.3, and also 0.6 million years ago. We have the evidence of a gigantic eruption that is sufficient to tear the guts out of the US of A. So this report has to be taken seriously. Well, just 2 years ago, there was a scare, in fact. We actually began to measure the size of this lava hotspot, and it turned out to be twice as big as we previously thought. And this report singled out Mount Vesuvius outside Naples, Italy, outside Mexico City, and Yellowstone as 3 hotspots where a Category 7 volcanic eruption could indeed take place in this century.
So there are only 3 of this size in all the world?
Well, there's several in Indonesia and New Zealand that have had Category 8 eruptions, in fact. But then again, we're talking about once every million years for Category 8. Category 7 will be many times the size of Mount St. Helens, enough to cause widespread destruction across a state, but not enough to destroy the US of A. But still something that we have to take very seriously now.
What would we get in the way of warnings, Michio?
Well, unlike a meteor from outer space, where you get no warning whatsoever, we get warnings. If you've seen movies like Pompeii, you know that there are days, in fact weeks, of eruptions building up, grumbling inside, underneath the ground, near the pocket of lava. So there would be enough time, several weeks, in order to begin evacuation if and when such an unlikely event were to take place.
All right, Michio Kaku on the news deck. No time to panic, but interesting, very interesting. Thank you.